Hey mamas, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kate Santana. I am going to talk to you today about a topic that I haven't touched on yet, but has been requested several times over the last few weeks, and something that I am passionate about talking about, and that is breastfeeding. Before we get started, I really apologize for my appearance, like no makeup, hair is wet and trying to dry, but I wanted to tape this while I had a chance. The baby is napping and it is just really hard to get everything done, so I'm doing this not totally like ready to go appearance wise, but I hope that this content is really helpful for you. So if you found the content of my channel to be helpful, it would be wonderful if you would consider subscribing so that you don't miss any videos. If you like this video, it helps me out as well. And then I'm going to link a few products down below that I suggest when it comes to breastfeeding. And if you'd like to shop through those links, they are affiliate links and it just helps to support my channel. It's fine if you don't shop through them, like nothing's gonna happen. But I really appreciate if you do. And then I also just want to say thank you. Like right now I have 62 subscribers. When I started, obviously everybody starts with 0. So I really appreciate the 62 people. If that's you who support my channel, I have friends who support me, and honestly I have friends that aren't subscribed to me. So if you did choose to subscribe to me, thank you. If this content is valuable for you, I really appreciate it. And one other thing I want to mention though is YouTube shows me like analytics of my videos, and I'm a math teacher, so I love analytics. And actually only 20% of my viewers are subscribed. So 80% of you aren't subscribed to my channel, but you're watching. Please click the subscribe button. It really does help me to grow my channel. But regardless, I'm going to continue to make these videos because I really enjoy getting to share what I have learned. And I hope that it helps some people out. So with all of that said, let's jump into today's topic. Today's topic is the 5 mistakes that you could be making, or that I made, to decrease your milk supply without knowing it. So really quickly, my daughter is 14 months old. 14 like and a half months old. She just stopped nursing about 3 weeks ago. But I was thinking or hoping that, well, 1 year was like definitely a goal, but I was hoping at certain points to make it to 2 years. We didn't make it that far. And I never thought that I was going to struggle with supply. Part of it is I just figured it was sort of like hereditary, and my sister never struggled with her supply, so I just felt like I wasn't going to, not knowing that my circumstance was going to end up looking a lot different than my sister's. And I did actually have to end up giving my baby formula, which was not something I ever thought I was going to have to do. And so not that there's anything wrong with formula. I feel really good about the choice that I made, and I'll talk about why a little bit later. And I feel like I was happy with the formula that I found, but in an ideal world, like if I could go back, which of course I can't, I would have done things differently to avoid even needing to use formula at all, because my supply did drop so low that I needed to use it to supplement the milk that I was making. So let's jump into the 5 mistakes. The first mistake that I made is that in the beginning, when I was pumping, I was not saving the milk. I would save it for a little while in the fridge in bottles, and then I eventually had multiple bottles in the fridge, and I didn't know which ones were pumped when. And you're supposed to, depending on who you talk to, like freeze them after 3 or 5 days. And sometimes I would be like, I don't know which of these were pumped 3 days ago. I don't know if any were pumped 7 days ago. Like, I don't know which bottle's which. And I dumped them down the sink. Like, it kills me now to even think about that, because I did not label the bottles, and I didn't just throw them in a freezer bag right away and freeze them. So I was really tired. I was exhausted. I was sleep deprived. Like, it's the first few weeks after having my first child. So I just wasn't being careful because I had a bunch of other things that I was worried about. But the number one thing I would change, or the first thing I would change, not the number one thing, but the first thing that I would change is I would go back and actually save every drop of milk that I pumped from the beginning, because that freezer supply would have helped me when my supply started dropping later on. So any time that you pump, do not let it go to waste. Take good care of it. Know what the guidelines are for how long the milk can stay in the fridge and how long it can stay in the freezer. The second thing that I regret, and this is kind of like two parts, the second and a third thing is I read this book that really, again, worked for my sister and I know works for a lot of people, called 12 Hours of Sleep by 12 Weeks Old. I was obsessed with this book. I poured over every single word of the book and like tried to figure out as soon as I could possibly start to implement these things. The book said, and I'm not going to get this quite right, but the book said that you could start when the baby was like 8 pounds or 10 pounds maybe, and when the baby was like 8 weeks old. So I started trying to implement these things that I'll talk about around 8 weeks, and it hurt my supply, and it just like overall hurt a lot of things when it came to my child. But the second thing or mistake that I made that you may also be doing is to try to space feedings out to be 4 hours apart and to get her down to just 4 feedings a day. So in the beginning, she was feeding maybe like 8 times, 7 times, 6 times. I was proud and like happy every time she cut a feeding out. I remember like I still have an Instagram post and it's like, I forget what month it was, maybe 2 months old. Yay, she's down to 5 feedings. That hurt my supply so much. Like, do not cut feedings out. This is how your supply works. The more milk is extracted from your breast, the more milk is going to be produced. The longer milk sits in your breast, not used or not drank by your baby, the less milk your body is going to think it needs to produce. There's no reason why you should try to space your feedings out when your child is still like 8 weeks old. I would say don't even space your feedings out when they're like until they're maybe 20 weeks old. Like there's no reason if you want to keep a good supply, in my mind. Again, this is my personal experience. I know other people have had success with this, but I do not think, and I wish I would have never tried to space feedings out. It doesn't make sense if you want a good supply. So that's the first thing from that book, or the second mistake that I made that I just wish I wouldn't have made. Like an aside to that is that the book also said you should try to make sure they're getting 6 ounces at every feeding. So around 8 weeks, I started to give her bottles that had 6 ounces in it, and she would eat the whole thing. And she basically ended up getting silent reflux because I was overfeeding her. She would just gulp the whole bottle down, but she didn't really want all that or need all that. She couldn't really stomach 6 ounces at a time. And so that caused all kinds of additional issues that I'm not going to get into in this video, but 4 feedings a day at 6 ounces a feeding is not a good idea. My personal opinion. Okay, my personal opinion. I wish I would not have done that. I do not suggest that if you are breastfeeding and trying to keep your supply. The third thing, again, related to this book, is trying to push your baby to sleep through the night or to cut down on night feedings too soon. Night feedings literally keep your supply alive. They help your supply so much. I think it's something like, and I'll put it in the description box down below, between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. is like the ideal time to empty your breast of milk, because your body produces the most milk during that window. So I'll put a correction up on the screen if I'm wrong about that, but there is a nighttime window where it is the best time to either get up and pump if you're exclusively pumping, or to nurse your child. If your child wants to wake up and nurse, you should do that, because it's only going to help your supply. Now, I understand you're sleep deprived, and I understand like it's really, really hard in the beginning. So if you don't want to do that, then that's fine. But if you want to have the strongest supply possible, you need to continue night feedings for at least the first 12 weeks, if not the first like 20 weeks, until your supply is super established. And even like regardless, every time you cut out a night feeding, you will lose, your supply will go down a little bit, because breast milk is not being emptied as fast as it normally is, and so your body will make less. Okay, so because these things were happening, and with her bottle, I thought she was being overfed. She was being overfed. I thought that nursing was where the overfeeding was coming from. I didn't really put the connection to the bottle, and I was reading some articles that said like if your baby's nursing, they can potentially be overfed if you have an oversupply and they're not getting enough hind milk. Again, there's so much to talk about when it comes to breastfeeding, so I'm not going to address that in this video, but you can look up more information about it. That could have been possible for me, but what I think really happened is that she was just getting too much in her bottle when I was trying to push for these 6 ounces at a time. So I started to actually kind of cut her off on her nursing sessions, because up until this point, she was nursing for about 45 minutes every single time she would nurse. And what I did was I cut it basically almost in half. I brought her down to like 25 minutes or 20 minutes per feeding. What this did is that this cutting back on her feeding time, which was mistake number 4, it prompted my body to again make less milk, and it prompted my body, along with like trying to get her to sleep through the night, to have my period come back. Now, I know that this is very personal, like it varies person to person, but when your body notices that less milk is being produced, that is one of the triggers to get your period back. Which is just like annoying, but that's not really the biggest deal about getting your period back. When I got my period back, my supply suffered every single month, and it suffered more and more the longer I had my period. And I've talked to other moms who, once their period came back, their supply dropped as well. This is actually biological, so I will put up on the screen here exactly what is happening when your body gets your period. Basically, the hormone changes in your body cause your milk supply to decrease slowly to the point where the few days before you get your period, or before I got my period, my supply was almost nothing. Once I got my period, it bounced back, but those were actually the weeks, and specifically the days where my supply was so low, I knew I needed to get formula, or my daughter was just not even going to be fed. Now, if you want to get pregnant, again, obviously it's good to have your period back, but also know, not that this should affect your decision to have another child right away at all. But again, if you get pregnant, eventually your supply will really dip. And I know people that this has happened to as well. And it's biology, it's hormonal. There's nothing you can do about it. So getting your period back and then also getting pregnant again would drop your supply as well. So just keep that in mind. And the last thing that's kind of small, but it does drop your supply, so it's something that I tried to avoid, was peppermint. So no peppermint tea, no peppermint oils, even peppermint in my toothpaste. I had like a natural toothpaste that was made with real peppermint oil, so I stopped using it. That can decrease your supply. I was actually eating a lot of mints at one point, and I didn't realize until like later it clicked that they were peppermints. And those peppermints I was consuming probably like 5 or 7 a day, which isn't a lot, but I was just like snacking on them almost, and I'm sure that it hurt my supply at least a little bit. So try to avoid peppermint, which is something you might not know. So those are the 5 mistakes that I made that I think hurt my supply. A few things that I think you could do: I would go back and I would add in a pumping session once a day and just immediately freeze everything and be really consistent. Not just like pump sometimes and some days, but really like force my body to believe that it needed an extra feeding a day or an extra pump session a day, so that I had enough milk left over when I went back to work. I think part of the reason why my supply ended up like slowly dipping as well, besides all of the reasons that I just mentioned, is that I had to go back to work at 12 weeks. Actually, at 12 weeks, it was just about Christmas break, and I was a teacher, so I had to go back for like 2 or 3 days, and then I got another 2 weeks off for Christmas. So by the time I like really went back, my daughter was like 14 weeks old. But still, like, hashtag America get your life together. I hate the fact that I had to go back at 12 weeks. It's just like, there's so many things I think America gets wrong. Don't get me wrong, like there are things that America gets right as well. But I think there's just things that it gets wrong, and maternity leave is one of them. So if you know that you have to go back to work, it's going to be even more important for you to build up a freezer supply, because your supply will dip if you just have to pump and your baby is not like nursing at your breast. At least for me, it did. In fact, my baby didn't even really want to nurse that much anymore. Once my supply started dipping, she would only nurse in the morning when there was the most milk available for her. And other than that, she basically wanted a bottle throughout the day. So unfortunately, my journey did not go exactly how I would have wanted. And there are definitely lessons learned and things that I would do differently next time. But I wanted to share them with you so that perhaps it could help you on your journey. At the end of the day, we made it to 12 months. We actually made it a little bit over 12 months. So I consider that a victory. And no matter how far you made it, I know that breastfeeding is a very personal decision, and it can carry with it a lot of emotions. And so I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad if like their supply was really low or dipped, or they used formula from the beginning or anything like that. It's just that I know information is power, and if you have a certain goal in mind, it's really important to have the information you need to get there. So again, I hope this was helpful. Please consider subscribing if it was. Please leave me a comment down below on anything you would add to this topic of mistakes to avoid when you are breastfeeding that could drop your supply. And I will talk to you guys soon.